leadership is tied to talent. It's tied to good talent. When it comes to hiring, when it comes to developing, when it comes to holding people accountable, helping them grow and learn from their mistakes, it's a critical part.
This is Leaders247. I'm your host, Gordon Whitehead. Our guest today is Enrique Washington, a founding partner of the Generator Group. I first met Enrique when he was working at Nike finding great talent for a great company. Enrique says his most meaningful work is to help individuals and organizations achieve their full potential. I count Enrique as one of my personal friends and a great mentor who, through his way of living life and conducting business, has demonstrated the right way to do things. We are pleased to host Enrique Washington on Leaders247. Enrique, thank you for joining our show. You know, our audience needs to know one thing about you right up front, and that is, why are you always smiling?
I'm very happy, very lucky in so many regards. When my two kids were born, I considered hitting the jackpot. So that's a big part of why I'm always smiling.
That's awesome. I know you're just you're a great father, great husband, and also just genuinely all around a good person. And so I'm really happy that you've joined our show today. So I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about your company, because I know one of the things you do is you really help organizations with their leadership development, their leadership acquisition strategies and processes. And so from your experience, what have you identified as some of the consistently sought after traits that people look for in leadership talent?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, one of the things we value the most as an executive search firm is the life after being placed, and we've been able to find a way to bridge that gap for organizations to put in place experiences for developing their leaders beyond the acquisition process. But what continues to be front and center, as we like to think of things in terms of core competencies, and for your listeners, if you're not familiar with competencies, they simply are a pattern of behaviors that make up an individual's knowledge, skills, ability, and other characteristics that are drivers of success in a particular role. So the competencies that tend to, again, be front and center, number one, communicativeness tends to be a very big one that is front and center for all leaders, particularly as you go higher in the organization. Another one that is starting to be more and more common around people issues is the term talent management. And this is where a leader has to be cognizant of an organization's system for how they plan for talent, how they assess talent, how they acquire, integrate, manage, and develop talent. And so regardless if you're small or large, that is becoming a core competency that is required for success in the role. Most leaders will have to hire at some capacity. As you become an enterprise leader, you're not only having to hire, but you're having to look at your organization much more strategically. Another competency that is critical is problem solving. That tends to be an important part of being successful in the role. And while some leaders may have people reporting into them, Gordon, there's still this notion of element of how do you ask the right questions? How do you look at problems objectively as opposed to out the gate pointing fingers? Looking at the problems objectively, asking the right questions, and then being able to have well-informed information. And in some cases, leaders will want to get scientific or objective data and information to help inform problem-solving decisions. So those are three that I would call out. And what I'll say lastly is it's always indicative of the organization, their culture, their size of business, their trajectory of growth, if they're growing, where they're going, that will play a major factor in what are the core competencies that are indicative of success in the role. the three that I mentioned are the three that tend to always come up for hiring purposes.
Well, thank you. That's very illuminating. I know our listeners will really benefit from that. Thank you. I want to dive into a topic that sometimes is a little sensitive, and that is the area of diversity. I know that there's a large interest and effort on making sure that management teams and organizations have proper diversity. And I remember in my experiences at larger corporations, we spent a lot of time on making sure we have a diverse organization. But I'd like to ask you, from your perspective, you've been in this business a long time. Tell me, what does it really mean to foster diversity in today's environment? How does an organization really achieve that?
Yes, it's a great question. And, the sigh in my voice is I'm very passionate about this topic and have done a fair amount of work in the last 5 years around it. But I think the first thing that really has to happen, and if you pick up any collateral, or not think collateral, but just information, articles, any kind of studies, it all goes back to the CEO. If the CEO deems that the topic, the interests, anything around this topic is core to their business, they have to endorse it. And then once they endorse it, it has to be cascaded down throughout the leadership. And then once it reaches, talent management or human resources, whatever the organizations call that function in their business, that's where there can be a collaboration effort to really define what they're trying to achieve. Some organizations are trying to achieve diversity at the leadership level. Some organizations are trying to achieve a diversity across their enterprise. But I think to really be successful and to be thoughtful, you just can't do it all at once. And I published an article a few years back in Diversity Executive around diversity is not a numbers game. And one of the things that I highlighted was, number one, if the CEO endorses it and there's a business strategy, then that's where the real thinking can start to happen as to where do they plug in? Are you trying to fill, I wouldn't say gaps, but a void of where there may be leadership presence, people of color, women at the C level, at the vice president level in a particular function? And then what does success look like in those roles, in those functions, in those business lines? What's the strategy to achieve that? And then what are the accountabilities? And if they're not accountabilities tied to it, it'll be a nice to have, and hey, hope we can get to it, or wish we could have gotten to it, and it'll fall on deaf ears. And there are some organizations who are doing it and doing it well, and there are others who have great intentions, but it's a hard thing to do. But that's how I would respond to that particular question.
Okay, thank you. Would you mind if we linked to your article from our podcast?
Absolutely. I interviewed a number of people in the field that were practitioners, and this article came just on the heels of completing a major study for the National Academy of Sciences Transportation Research Board, where we investigated why there were so few CEOs in public transportation agencies. So we're looking at people of color in particular regarding the study. And so that article kind of came just after that study. And so it's very short, quick read, and I'd love to share with as many people as possible.
Let's shift to another topic here. And you've recruited for a number of roles over the years. I'd like to dive into one or two of those roles to understand how the leadership traits and characteristics needed in those roles maybe are different. And would you mind highlighting a few companies and roles that you recruited for?
Yes, one that comes to mind that's mentioned in the publishing of my recent book, Competencies at Work, happened at Superfeed. Superfeed is a privately held lifestyle consumer goods company that designs, manufactures custom insoles. Most people may relate to them as orthotics. I would say that they're not that technical of a product, but they make a really good product. Um, and we were looking to uh, bring in a new successor to the current president that was looking to move on and retire and spend some time with his family. And the difference between the person leaving and coming in is that the individual, had to have a real strong core around growth, having helped organizations grow, strategic thinking, talent management. Coming back to that, they had a real specific target number that I'm unable to that I'm not able to say because they're privately held, that they wanted to achieve, that was going to be based on how they acquired and how they developed talent. And I'd be happy to elaborate on any of that I've just shared. That's one. And, I would say another was the vice president of sales for a company that is primarily in the sporting goods space, helping to design and manufacture products to help athletes of all levels improve their speed, agility, their quickness, their overall performance in their respective sports, be lacrosse, basketball, baseball, soccer, football, swimming, you name it. They have products that help enhance and develop an athlete's performance. And that role in particular was looking to shift the organization from where it was to where they wanted to go by bringing in a true vice president of sales that had helped scale the business, that understood both mass merchant, specialty retail, that was very strategic in their thinking, and more importantly, talent. How could they hire and foster talent to help the business scale? So those are two. I'm happy to elaborate on any of the information I've just shared.
Well, those are excellent, and they line up so well with what you spoke of right at the beginning. I think that what I'd like to do is ask you, given that you've had so much experience recruiting in these types of leadership roles, and also I'd like to point out that you've been a leader in organizations doing a lot of different things. What do you think are some of the most dangerous or non-productive things that leaders might do in general?
Dangerous and unproductive habits, from what I've seen and witnessed amongst leaders across a variety of different organizations, both enterprise level and non-enterprise level. When I say enterprise, I'm talking about the multi-billion-dollar organizations down to sub $100 million organization, and that is trying to stay too close to everything in their business. As you move up in your organization, as you take on more scope, you have to delegate and trust and and hold people accountable for the work. But I've seen leaders try to be in every meeting that they really can't be in. Some of these are CEOs trying to be in meetings that should be led by a head of product or by a head of marketing. Not to say they shouldn't be in some of those meetings, but what I've witnessed and heard and gotten feedback on as I've done, some follow-up work around our placements has been trying to do it all, and not holding others accountable. So those are two that I would call out that can be deadly to unproductivity, to being unproductive as a leader.
Wow, that's excellent. So if you find, if you found yourself underneath one of those types of behaviors, any suggestions? I get this question a lot. People ask me, what do I do if I have a bad manager? And I mean, this is an example of a situation that you just outlined. You're working at a pretty high level, working pretty hard on things, and now you're seeing some of these behaviors. How do you react as a subordinate?
Yes, and that's a little bit of a tricky question because some of the other variables that come into play, politics, Um, the person that was hired, was it the leader's first choice, or were they influenced by someone else to hire the person? So all these things you have to take into account. But what I think tends to be the simplest way to work with a leader that might be micromanaging or might be a little bit in the weeds is to get real clear on the outcomes that they need to achieve, to the point of where you're writing them down, you're getting buy-off from that leader. And then number two, to establish a way to report back and keep someone in the loop. Doesn't mean they have to be in every meeting, but say, look, obviously these things are important to you, but I want to make sure I preserve your time, but also build your confidence over time and make sure that I'm hitting these objectives. And you also know that if I run into any roadblocks or obstacles, I'm going to give you fair notice to alert you and then ask for your help. But meanwhile, I want to be able to demonstrate to you that I can give you updates and status and call you in when need be, with plenty of time to resolve any major issues if I've already taken steps to do that. And then coming up with a way to say, how do I report back? Am I going to send you a one-page report at the end of the week? Let me give an example of this. I hired a vice president of sales for a different company that I hadn't named, and he was good at delegating. He was good at keeping his fingers on the pulse. And I said, well, how do you do that, Rick, without being in all the meetings and calling every day? He says, at the end of the week, I have my team submit to me a special report, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's a half a page report. And it just calls out some of the key things, any challenges, things that you've done to mitigate those challenges, and if you need help. But they were short enough to where he could read them quickly and know that, okay, things are okay on this side of my business. Or, got a potential red flag. I think I need to follow up on this. But it was a way for him to delegate and to say, look, I got to keep my finger on the pulse. I'm getting some pressures from CEO to be on details that I need to know. I trust you, but I also need you to give me a little bit more information that maybe I ordinarily would not ask for. And here's how we're going to go about it. And so that was one way that he did it without being in every meeting and calling every day. He just simply said, look, I need this information. I need to give it to me in a very digestible format. Here's what the format looks like, and here's what I need it by. And the protocol that if there was any follow-up that had to happen, we could address it in the Monday morning status meeting or staff meeting. So that's just one example I'll share.
That's an excellent. What I love about that example is it provides a solution for both sides of the coin. That is very excellent.
Yes.
So thank you. In fact, I ask that question frequently, and your answer is really clear. So, in fact, your answer breathes hope into the process. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to shift a little bit here and ask you, how does someone find a mentor, and how does somebody really use a mentor?
That's a great question. And, I will say that I have some thinking around that I'll share to answer that question, but I also am a believer in, going to a specific body of work to get real clear on what the experts around this topic think. And so I'll touch it from both sides. Number one is you need to know exactly what you want out of a mentor. If you want a mentor, what do you want out of a mentor? What are you trying to solve for? What are you trying to develop? And then that becomes a clear framework for, hey, I want to achieve this. I need a person that knows this, or I need a person that understands what this means. Because then that way the person can see the alignment. If you want a mentor just to have as a friend or someone who's a high-profile individual, that's not going to be the best use of time. But a person can select a mentor through their network, saying, letting people know, like, I'm in need of a mentor. Here's what I want to get better at. Here's what I want to solve. Or here's what I want to achieve and reach or solve. And can you help me identify someone that might be able to help me along this path? That's number one. And in your existing ecosystem. Number two, LinkedIn is a great pool of it's just a big, massive ecosystem of people all over the world. And this is why it's important for you to know exactly what you want to solve and do, what industry perhaps, what type of job. And then it gives you a way to maybe reach out to somebody cold, which I think can be received well if it's positioned right. That's why I always think the introduction is better. And you're going to benefit from having the mentor. I guess the best way to use that mentor is, number one, is to structure how you want to use them with the individual. Make it collaborative, because their time's going to matter, and maybe they can only give you once a month, once a quarter. So whatever time they can give you, make sure that, number one, it's structured on how you want them to help, and number two, you're going to follow through on what you commit to do because you're taking their time up. There's a good body of work out there, and obviously I'm a little biased here because this individual is my sister, but Dr. Krista Washington, you can find her on LinkedIn, or you can even Google her. She is a staff member at North Carolina State University, overseeing a leadership program there. She's also an adjunct professor there. But all of her research has been centered around mentoring. How to find mentors, what do you do with mentors once you find them, who makes the best mentors. And she sort of paints the picture of what that can look like. And in her work, there's hundreds of citations of additional body of work that people can go to glean more information around this particular topic.
Thank you for sharing that. We'd like to share a link on our page as well, and invite her to be a guest here somewhere along the line. So
I'm sure she would love that.
Great. Thanks, Enrique. That was very insightful. Again, that's one of the most popular questions we hear from our audience. So thank you for the dive in there. I'd like to ask you about your book. You've written an impressive work called Competencies at Work, Providing a Common Language for Talent Management. And we would love to host a link to your book on our website so our listeners can check it out and purchase it. And I have a few questions. I've been able to look over some of the topics that you've covered, and they're very interesting to me. And I'd like to know, just right up front, what prompted you to write this? I mean, writing a book is not easy. And so there must have been something really important driving you.
Yes. I was asked a question by Dr. Talia Bauer, who was very instrumental in us having the opportunity to write this book. She had asked me the question one day, of the type of work you do, what's the most important part of it? What do you absolutely see as a must have, must do, completely essential? And I said, well, that's very easy from my perspective. And to answer that question, it's clearly defining success, what success looks like in a role. And that sort of set the stage for a book, because the question was around writing a book. She had approached me about writing a book. She was looking for authors and asked if I would be interested. I said, absolutely. But when I thought broader about that question, it really is it was sort of this notion of, wow, the critical part of my work is the acquisition piece. One of the most important decisions a company makes about their employees is the decision to hire them. I don't want to steal that quote from my good friend, Dr. Stephen Hunt, who wrote the book Hiring Success, but he talked about that in his book, and we've talked about that at great lengths. And then when I started to think about that particular statement, it's really once people get into the organization where there's an opportunity to take full advantage of a talented individual. If you hired them, you thought they were talented. How do you take full advantage of that talented individual? And that's where this whole broader thinking around talent management came into play. And so that was really the impetus for writing the book and the conversations that led to the book. And as we started to think bigger picture about the book and broader about the book, it really moved beyond just the acquisition piece into the whole body of talent management.
Oh, I love that focus and that question you ask. I mean, that's really a brilliant question, and I wish more leaders of organizations would ask it. How do you take full advantage of your talent? And I love the proposition, which is we hired someone, we assume they must be talented. It's a great setup. Thank you, and I appreciate your insight on that. Now, from your perspective, who really should read your book?
So from my perspective, the book was dedicated to organizational leaders and talent management professionals who are dedicated to hiring and developing their people. So that's who we dedicated the book to. And the individuals who should pick this book up and read it are, number one, CEOs. CEOs who are trying to grow a business, who are thinking about their business strategically, and where talent will play a real critical piece. The other individuals that should read this book are people that are in the profession of human resources, talent management, organizational development, because competency sort of gives you that framework for how do you define success across your talent management continuum. And I've already had some great comments from CEOs and other individuals who do work in talent management read this book and say that it's practical. I mean, the book was written as like an airport book. You open the book when you board a plane on the West Coast. You're done with the book when you land on the East Coast. It's that type of a read, and it's not an academic book, although it's marketed to MBA programs across the globe. It's really designed for individuals in practice and those who aspire to do this type of work. And there are great examples in there. There are tools in there to really help leaders and talent management professionals, think about this holistically.
That's excellent. I'm excited, and like I said, we'll host a link to your book on our page and promote it because I believe it's got great power. Let's talk a little bit more about books in general, other than your own great work that you've just completed. What kind of things do you read as a leader? Or what kind of books might you recommend to leaders?
Yes. So, you can go broke subscribing to a number of great magazines out there. So I've actually narrowed it down to two. So the first one is I read and receive on a regular basis Talent Management magazine. And they have great topics in there that covers all of this full spectrum of things related to talent acquisition, talent planning, talent retention, diversity, the whole spectrum. That same organization also puts out Diversity Executive and Chief Learning Officer. And the neat thing about that organization is that the magazine's free to subscribe to it, both the hard copy as well as digital copy. But I get Talent Management magazine, and the other one I read is Harvard Business Review. And frequently they have in there, in line with the business topics around strategy and things that are happening globally, they always bring forth topics around talent that are very relevant in the day's marketplace. So those are two periodicals that I read on a regular basis. I get them monthly. They speak to me. They're practical, and when we look beyond that, one other book that I would recommend, my good friend Dr. Stephen Hunt, who's a practitioner in the field. He's an industrial organizational psychologist. He wrote a book called Hiring Success, and he wrote that book for practitioners, people hiring at all levels. And it's a short read. It's very practical. I've actually used it in my class as an adjunct professor at Portland State. It's another one that I would recommend. And I honestly try to read books beyond business, just so I can have just a level head around, topics that are out there. And I tend to love to read autobiographies. And if anybody's looking for a great autobiography beyond business, I would recommend Major Taylor. It's a book about sports, and I've always been pleased to see what sports does for people, how it changes people's lives for the good, how it helps to foster teamwork, how it helps to foster confidence. And this is an amazing story about an African American cyclist at the turn of the century. And while there are several books there, like 3 books out on him, the one that I would recommend is the book called Major.
I love it. That actually is exactly the kind of literature I'm looking to host on my website and looking to help drive people to. I think the business books are important and everything, but I love the idea of being able to get out beyond just a business mindset and look at people and look at their lives. Thank you for sharing that. We'll definitely put links to all of these things on our website and recognize you as the one who suggested them. So thank you. As we wind down here on this interview, I'd like to ask you just kind of this core summarizing question. In the end, what do you really think good leadership is?
Good leadership, from my perspective, again, this is simply from my perspective. Good leadership, number one, is listening. Listening to what you're being told, listening to what you're reading, listening to what's being shared out there in terms of innovation, things that are moving, simply just listening. And with that, it then brings about my next point I want to make is the ability to make decisions, to make thoughtful decisions, and doing that in a way that's timely. And if I look at some of the things that have happened in our business world, one is I think about this whole concept that Netflix has come out with, just streaming video, when you've had others that were first in the market, like Blockbusters and Hollywood Entertainment. And the question is, did they listen? Maybe they did, but maybe they listened too late, or maybe they didn't listen more intently, or maybe they didn't make decisions. I don't know. But there's a lot of information being shared out there today, that's being tweeted, shared on LinkedIn, that's being published in magazines, being published in books, shared on CNN News, shared on local news, shared on the Wall Street Journal. These are all platforms for leaders to listen. Just listen, with the understanding that, how does this help inform my business? How does it help inform the way I should think, how I should be looking at my business? Should I be looking at my business differently? And what decisions should I be making about my business? So, and then I think I would close it up with saying that, goes without question that good leadership is tied to talent, is tied to good talent. When it comes to hiring, when it comes to developing, when it comes to holding people accountable, helping them grow and learn from their mistakes, it's a critical part. And one of the things that I'm hoping will happen as I conclude in this response to you is for leaders to think beyond the traditional way. And what I mean by that is there are talented people out there who may not come out of your industry. There are talented people out there that may not speak the same language that you speak in your culture today, but they're talented. They demonstrate the right behaviors to be successful. And with coaching and guidance and good leadership, no pun intended, they will succeed. So I would hope that leaders start to look at people very differently, very much like REI did when they hired Sally Jewell. Sally Jewell came from the banking industry into a consumer products, more or less even outdoor consumer products company, and led that company, made it successful, went on to be the Secretary of Interior Secretary of State under the Obama administration, and found a new successor to carry on the work that she did. That kind of thinking will really help with this whole notion of good leadership and for companies to grow and be prosperous. My perspective.
I think that's a brilliant perspective. Thank you. I have agreed and argued for that for many, many years. Don't get locked into your industry. Think broadly. Thank you, Enrique. That was just brilliant. So, Do you have any parting words of wisdom?
Well, I no real parting words with them. I just want to say thank you for having me on your show. I've enjoyed the thoughtful questions, and I hope the information that I shared will be useful and helpful for individuals out there that are looking to have be strategic and think differently about their talent agenda.
Well, thank you. It has been a privilege to have you spend some time with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for listening to our Leaders 247 podcast. We want to know what you think. Please email us at feedback@leaders247.com. If you have follow-on questions for any of our guests, let us know and we will get answers and post the replies. Please remind your friends and family to check us out at www.leaders247.com or find us on iTunes. Leaders 247 is all about bringing the best content possible to anyone trying to become a leader or become a better leader. At Leaders 247, we like to recommend books. In this podcast, I recommend you check out my book on Selling to Business. Selling to Business is a self-help book designed to create authentic, long-lasting, powerful, and profitable associations. Anyone who is responsible for developing and maintaining relationships, whether internal or external to their organization, will find this book full of quick and valuable suggestions. While this book focuses on how to get started in enterprise selling, the lessons shared give practical clues and examples of how to lead, how to develop, and how to interact with people for an authentic leadership experience. If you want to sharpen how you achieve your goals, how you prioritize time with leaders, how you take advantage of your executive time when you get it, or how to continue to develop your talents, Selling to Business is a good source and a quick read. I will include a 30% discount code in our podcast notes. At Leaders 247, we maintain a list of books on our website that have been recommended by our guests. If you like a reading suggestion from one of our guests, start your purchase with us by visiting our website. That way, we receive the benefit of revenue sharing through Amazon's affiliate program, which allows us to continue to bring great content to you. Tune in for our next podcast where we feature another interview with an insightful leader.